Welcome. Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta, Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, and
I'm Camille, Barron, a healthcare advisor and financial coordinator, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And this is part of our continuing series about the coronavirus and its impact on various sectors of society. And today we're going to be talking about its impact on the economy.
we sure are, not just the impact, but later impact. And we're so lucky to have back with us. We call him CC, but it's Cliff Caplan, and we call him CC because it's Cliff with a C and Caplan with a C. Cliff, welcome, welcome, welcome. You were on one of our first shows over 10 years ago. You partake in our financial literacy, that Brighten Up Club that was started at the high school maybe 6 years ago. So we're all ahead of our time. And out of everyone that was there at the course, they asked for you the most, more than anything else, which is interesting because you talk about investments.
Well, I didn't know that, and I am flattered by that. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that with me.
Well, tell us about yourself and go for it.
All right. Well, I'm a certified financial planner, which can mean a lot of things, but I'm a financial planner / wealth manager. I've been in practice for 42 years plus now. I'm showing my age.
Really?
I recently, a year ago, I moved to Canton, Mass. And I work primarily with clients in retirement planning, estate planning, and education planning, those three areas. As I said, been 42 years, long time. This is perhaps the most interesting environment that I've been in. And there have been a lot of interesting times during the course of my career.
There sure have. So Cliff, we're hearing a lot of mixed signals about the economy. The market is going crazy up and down. We hear unemployment's going down. Small businesses, in some cases, especially those that are affected by the coronavirus, like the restaurant industry, we're hearing more and more of them are shutting their doors for good. What the heck is going on here?
Well, I think, Camille, in my view, what's going on in the economy is sort of unmasked a lot of trends that were already occurring. And of course, there's other trends too, as you've just indicated, with restaurants and the travel business in particular. The dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots has certainly widened during this economy. I just saw some numbers just the other day where the upper 1 or 2% in terms of wealth in this country have actually increased their wealth since the beginning of the pandemic, while the more lower income people that are struggling mightily are having even more difficulty, the ability to pay their rent, the ability just to feed their family. So again, it's sort of laid out to bear right now, the differences, and of course that also gets put into the political discussion that we're having now during this presidential election season. So, but there's the biggest thing, and I get these questions all the time, as you indicated at the beginning of this segment, is that there is seemingly a disconnect between the economy and the stock market, and there's a lot of uncertainty to that. And I'll provide you and your viewers with my view on it, but we've never been here before, and perhaps I can provide a few signals for people to look at and to have an indication of where it's going. But the stock market has regained most of the losses that it experienced from mid-March till the early part of April. As most of your viewers who are involved in the market know, stock market declined about 30 to 35% in a short period of time, and it has since rebounded. Okay, but the economic data that comes out is sort of all over the place, and I do have to say this, and I'm not an unemployment expert, but some of the unemployment numbers look better. But a lot of this has to do with the amount of people that are actually actively seeking jobs, and it also has to do with how do you define employed? I mean, people that are part-time employed are included, and so they're, so the unemployment numbers, while they are getting better, I think last time I saw it was around 8%. It's a bit misleading, and so, and as you indicated, particularly in some industries like restaurants and the travel industry, it continues to be bad and will likely be bad for the foreseeable future.
Mhm.
You know what I don't understand is, well, I never could figure out the stock market anyway, unless it's people going around saying, buy this stock, buy that stock, buy that stock. But a lot of people I know were getting that $600 things, and they were making more staying at home than going to work. But now you hear about how the, how about, like you say, they can't pay the rent. I'm wondering, a lot of them just don't want to pay the rent because of the delay that you can't get evicted.
Well, that could be, sometimes, Roberta, that sometimes these kinds of situations, these meltdowns, brings up both the worst and the best of humankind. So let me address that. I have a very good client locally who's a plumbing contractor in our area. And as an example, his right-hand man, and he was keeping quite busy. Plumbers are always busy, all right? Good times and bad. His right-hand man almost begged him to be laid off because, to your point, he was collecting both state unemployment plus the $600 of federal unemployment. And so he was making more money in unemployment than he was by working. And the problem with they call it the stimulus package, the first stimulus package that provided the $600 a week of federal unemployment plus the $1,200 stipend, all right, for individuals that made under $75,000. The problem is they rushed it through, and perhaps they had to. I'm not going to, I don't really have a comment on that because time is of the essence. But a lot of people, a lot of money was wasted in my view. All right, a lot of money was wasted.
Hey, how do I get in on that? Tell us too how the.
Well, Roberta, you make too much money. That's the problem. See, if you made over $150,000 as a couple, you didn't qualify. Okay.
Yeah, but what about net?
Well, I'm talking about taxable income. So it does bring out the worst and the best, as I said, but let me talk about the stock market for a second, because that's another interesting situation. And I recently, and I sent it to you, of course, I wrote a newsletter about it. Why is there such a disconnect between the economy and the stock market? You have, as we speak here, bars in Boston, what's the bar called? Four Seasons, I think it's called, is the big sports bar near Boston Garden. It's just closed. Restaurants are closing right and left. One of my favorite restaurants locally that I've been going to for 25 years just closed recently. And it's going to get worse. They're talking maybe 45% of restaurants closing as this thing continues. And so
how about the function? I hate to interrupt, but the function facilities that aren't restaurants, they've been closed since March. And what happens is you have the surrounding states are open. And so it's taking business from Massachusetts, and those places pay employment taxes and sales taxes on food and everything. So they're really killing the economy. And then
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you in this sense. So I'm sure both of you saw the story that there was a wedding held up in Maine just a few weeks ago in some obscure place. Yeah. And I don't remember. I don't think there was more than 100 guests, but I might be wrong. But the point is that they were insulated from COVID, and there was an outbreak, and the outbreak has now been spread all over Maine. Okay, so those states, as you said, that have allowed these types of functions to occur, unfortunately, in many cases, have paid the price. And it's no different than what's going on in universities. As we speak, as you probably know, 11 Northeastern students were dismissed, and they're keeping their tuition, which is a whole other story, because of these parties. College students want to get out, and this is an ongoing problem. It doesn't matter if it's happening at the best of schools or
okay. I got to respectfully disagree again, because in your backyard are places like that, or places where they don't have licensed facilities.
Right.
The licensed facilities have all kinds of health things in place ahead of time. And now with the COVID, they have even more. They take temperatures at the door. They have extra this, extra that. So you're better off in a licensed facility because they'll be more careful than in your backyard where your
Well,
dog goes.
Well, that could be, but I don't know about the two of you, but despite the safeguards that restaurants have taken, I will not eat indoors at a restaurant. And it has nothing to do with the measures they're taking to clean the booze, to separate you or whatever. It has everything to do with the ventilation. And that's the problem with restaurants. It's also the issue that we're dealing with in schools.
Exactly.
Down to Sharon,
Right.
right now, we know what's going on. The teachers are afraid to go back because the ventilation system in these schools is not up to snuff, and they're afraid of catching it because they're at risk.
It wasn't before either. Well, in our school, I know there was no air conditioning in the whole school.
Yeah. But let me try to switch gears. I want to make sure that I get this out there for your viewers, which I think is important, the disconnect between the stock market and the economy. So, well, a lot of people know this, but when that 3-week meltdown of the stock market occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, the Federal Reserve made two very important moves, and they were exactly the right moves. Most people would agree with that. I'm not speaking alone here. First of all, as you probably know, they dropped interest rates, short-term interest rates, to between 0 to 0.25%. And to know that, all you have to do is go to your money market account, and you know you're getting about 0.1% if you're lucky, okay? The second thing they did, which is maybe even more important, was that they made a pronouncement that they were in a position to backstop different types of mortgages and bonds, okay? Now, they did some of that back in the '08 financial crisis, but they also took it to another level. They backstopped investment-grade corporate bonds. They even said that they would back up municipal bonds, which are issued by cities, towns, states, or whatever. Now, why that was important, because a lot of people didn't realize while the stock market was melting down, the bond market, which dwarfs the stock market exponentially, had a similar meltdown. Now, it wasn't to the same level because bonds are more conservative, but there was a liquidity crunch where individuals and institutions were selling bonds, and there weren't enough buyers to take on to liquidate these bonds, and so they melted down to a lesser degree. And the Federal Reserve stepped in and it stopped it immediately, and that was extremely important. And what happened shortly thereafter, and this, just to take it one step further about the stock market, is that there's an acronym that I like to quote. TINA, like the girl's name Tina, TINA. There is no alternative. When you're getting 0 to 0.25% in the money market, all right, you're looking for other places to make money because you're not even keeping up with inflation at that level. And so people started putting money back in the stock market. Some of the reasons because the market had dropped so precipitously, you buy on the weakness. Others because they felt, and I'm not on board with this. They think we've heard the term a V-shaped economy, where once we get out of this thing, the economy is going to bounce right back up. I don't share that belief. I certainly hope it happens, but I don't share that. And then another thing that happened, which I think is intriguing to me, because Roberta, you mentioned the $600 of unemployment, the $1,200, all right? You were lamenting how you didn't qualify for the 12 or the 6, nor did I. But what has happened is a lot of millennials have taken that money, okay, that they might have bet on sports, which were, were on hiatus for several months at the beginning of the pandemic, and they have established accounts with companies like Robinhood, which many of your viewers may know is a low-cost stock trading platform, and they've been basically where they might have put money betting on sports. If sports were active, they would put money in the stock market, and while the accounts are quite small, there's hundreds of thousands, if not a few million, of these type of accounts, and it's helped to fuel the stock market. So there's all these different factors where the stock market has come roaring back. But maybe the most important thing is the fact that the tech stocks, another acronym, FANG, F-A-A-N-G, which stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. You could add Microsoft to that equation, have just flourished in this kind of market because people are using more and more technology. Look at Netflix. I just saw an interview with Reed Hastings, the CEO. Their numbers have just expanded mightily. And so these companies represent, last time I saw, about 27% of the market capitalization. So they have brought the entire stock market up. And so it's a little bit misleading if you delete these stocks from the market. Believe it or not, the market has just sort of hovered. Okay, it's regained most of the losses they incurred during those first 3 weeks, but the overall stock market overall is not recovered nearly as great as the tech stocks.
So you're saying really that it's skewed, the
Heavily skewed, Camille.
yeah.
You're exactly right. Yep.
And one of the other things too, Cliff, that was mentioned is the stock market also responds to promising news. And now that the past couple of weeks, we've heard that there may be a vaccine sometime in late October or earlier November, and the stock market actually did well that day. It actually
clearly it does. We have, of course, our local company Moderna, which just a week or two ago came out with extremely promising news, and the market soared that day. But that tends to be more short term because as they begin to examine this a little deeper, it tends to come back a little bit. I think it's a misnomer, and maybe I hope this isn't a political statement, but I do think it's misleading to suggest that we're going to have viable vaccines by early November. These things take a while, and that's rushing it out. And we're not here to talk about vaccines if and when and where, but the reality of it is that viable vaccines, and there'll be several of them from what I understand, really won't be available to the public until sometime in 2021.
I've heard the same thing.
Now, the other thing I do believe is that, we had a big spike up in southern states and the western states a month or two ago, and it seems to level off a little bit. These states tend to be a little bit more conservative. In my view, it's highly unlikely that they would have another shutdown unless we have the so-called second wave, which a lot of epidemiologists are still afraid of. But I don't think the political will is there to shut these economies down. And then you get into this, this ethical argument about how many deaths are worth it to keep the economy up. I don't have an answer to that. I wouldn't even attempt to address it. So I don't really foresee, even under, I wouldn't say a worst case scenario, but a recurrence, a second wave of more shutdowns. But it certainly could have an impact.
Fascinating. I'm learning all these new words. Fang, Tina.
Acronyms. There's another one for you, Roberta. FOMO, F-O-M-O, which is similar to Tina. And what that means is fear of missing out. And so when the stock market is rising like it had been until recently, a lot of investors, and this is just human nature, I've observed this for the entire duration of my career, people will jump on board because they don't want to miss out on the gains. A good example, a stock that's a good example of that is Tesla, okay? Tesla has soared, all right? And lately it's pulled back quite a bit. They did a stock split. I'm not a Tesla expert. I don't want anybody to think that, but people have been jumping on board with Tesla, and maybe they've been jumping off recently because it has declined a bit. But when the stock, I forget how many hundreds of percent it's up this year. It's huge.
Isn't there another company that's making electric cars?
Well, there's a few. GM is involved with it. I think Toyota. But, Tesla is at the forefront. And, I do a fair amount of reading about this. And the thing about Tesla, and I don't have the answer. I'm just conveying what I've read. This is a whole new technology. And so it's a game changer. And while other companies, I know Mary Barra, who's the CEO of GM, is very involved, but they're not nearly to the same point that Tesla is. I mean, that's what Tesla does. They manufacture electric-powered cars. And,
who's making flying cars?
I'm sorry?
Who's making flying cars?
Oh, I think you've been watching the Jetsons too long, Roberta.
I would like to have a flying car. I would like to have an electric car. And my husband, Sherry, says, well, they're 80,000. I says, well, the people that rented from us, for a week, I said they didn't have much money and they had an electric car.
Well, some Teslas, Teslas at different levels. I have a good friend of mine who's a car buff, and he had the high-end one. It was his favorite car of all time. But there are cheaper Teslas that are affordable for the masses. So I'm not a Tesla expert, but Tesla it seems to me is a game changer in this. My issue, I considered buying a Tesla a year and a half ago. My big issue right now is all the recharging stations. And, I'd be reluctant to take a long trip because, then you have to recharge the battery and that, you got to find the station, you got to wait, have it recharge. And I think that's all going to change in the near future. But right now, to me, that's still a challenge.
I think you can plug into just a household circuit, can't you?
Oh, yeah, I believe, but I'm talking about when you're on the road on a trip. Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
But you keep your cars neat. We're slobs, so we don't want to mess up an expensive
Well,
car.
that's because you have grandchildren. I have only one grandchild, and she's out in Pittsburgh, so I don't have to worry about that.
We have 12 now.
Well.
And Camille has one.
There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Everybody's having these babies. My nephew, I don't want to take away from you, but they had a in vitro. What do you call it? They rented
Vitro
a womb.
fertilization, yeah.
What is it called, Camille? What they did? They rented the womb. They had twins.
Oh, a
and they had
surrogate
to
mother?
go to Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, during this whole pandemic, and they're
Well,
in their early 50s. Good
Well,
luck.
it's going to
with
be
that.
interesting. Are there going to be a massive amount of births 9 months when when COVID broke out? Just like there have been during blackouts, and we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, the little tax deductions. But I still can't get over in the VV, instead of virtual visit, the doctors use VV, virtual visit.
That's right. I've had them
Now we
myself.
have another one, viable vaccines.
Yeah.
Just absolutely fascinating. You always have these new things. This Tina, that's a good one. Thing. What was the thing again? Facebook, Apple. What was the other?
Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Oh, Amazon.
And I add Microsoft to that list.
Yes, definitely want to do that.
But let me, I want to, I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to just mention going forward, because this is the big question. We're now here in almost the middle of September, and we have a presidential election coming up,
We have some time.
which could have a huge, probably will have a big impact on what happens, depending, and I'm not even sure it depends who gets elected, to be frank, but it could have a big impact. But here's the point I want to make. So there is a bit of a balancing act here. The Federal Reserve, as I mentioned, has created a monetary environment that has actually supported stocks. I mentioned FOMO and I mentioned Tina, all right? That will only go so far. I don't know how far that is. Everybody speculates. Some of the most renowned economists that I listen to don't know. So far, it's worked, all right? I am taking measures to protect my clients' portfolios because I have many clients that are either on retirement mode already or soon to be. So some of the things, just a couple little tidbits here that maybe your viewers will find useful. Because the Federal Reserve stepped in and supported bonds first, and we all have heard it's highly unlikely that interest rates are going anywhere in the foreseeable future. There are certain types of bonds, fixed income instruments that I have my more conservative clients in that I'm very comfortable that they will be fine going forward. On the stock market side, the equity side, a few things. So number one, I like healthcare stocks. Now, all of us here are boomers on this call, all right, on this Zoom call, and we're all getting older, and they keep making tremendous advancements. Forget about the vaccines, even. I'm talking about just advancements they make in medical equipment. As an example, we've heard about the terrible situation with nursing homes and the COVID deaths that have occurred there. But some of the advances they have made in other areas have allowed people that ordinarily would be confined to a nursing home to be able to remain in their home. And I think that is going to continue. Even healthcare companies like United Healthcare are doing quite well, all right? These virtual calls that we're on right now are actually pretty profitable from what I understand. So healthcare stocks are a good defense mechanism, and they shouldn't be confused with biotech. I mean, we're here in the biotech capital of the world in Greater Boston at Kendall Square. But I like healthcare stocks as a defensive measure. And the other thing I've been using quite extensively are utility stocks. Now, those investors that are watching the show, utility stocks were your classic widow stock. They generate a very consistent and predictable dividend. And as many follows the stock market. Now, you only have to follow the stock market. You know, a lot of companies that historically have paid dividends have either reduced or in some cases fully suspended their dividend in order to hoard cash in the event that their businesses require it because of the loss of revenue. But utilities are regulated, okay? And they're able to charge a certain amount per customer to generate a certain level of income. And it's all regulated, of course, by the states. The initial thought was because of all the businesses that shut down, that they would use, their utility use would be lower and lower. But the fact is that so many people are at home and using more utilities, it seemingly is more than offset that. And they can always raise the rates if they have to. So I've been, and the other thing is about utilities, it's sort of a bond proxy. In other words, an alternative to bonds. They generate income, their dividend income is greater than what you would get in a similar type bond. So for those looking for income, those that are looking to put a floor under any possible further decline in the stock market, it seems to me that utility stocks represent a very, very good alternative. So these are some of the changes I've been making. I also use, without getting too esoteric, different strategies that hedge the portfolio. One in particular says that if the stock market were to drop 30%, as it did in March and early April, you're hedged that full 30%. So if it drops 30%, you're down 0. If it drops 50%, you're down 20. In other words, anything in excess of 30. So there's all sorts of strategies that you can use to hedge the downside if you're fearful that the stock market may have another precipitous decline, which it experienced back in March.
And of course,
you certainly know more than I do.
the stock market, of all things, doesn't like uncertainty. And
Right.
I don't think we've had a time in recent years where there's been more uncertainty.
What is
Between
some of the
COVID,
other healthcare stocks besides
sorry?
United Healthcare? Is Blue Cross a healthcare stock?
Well, Blue Cross is not a listed security. It's a non. So
that's
I think it's a nonprofit, so it's not listed. But United Healthcare, it certainly is. You know, one of the more interesting aspects of this, which I'll take a minute, is real estate. And I have to admit that I was absolutely dead wrong on what I thought was going to happen to residential real estate. I thought it would be a pullback because people lost jobs, at the onset of the pandemic. What I didn't anticipate was the flight from the cities that greatly increased demand. And, here in Eastern Massachusetts, I mean, prices are flying out, they're flying off the shelf. I did not anticipate that. I really did think there'd be a slowdown. And also with second homes, you hear the stories about in New York where people have taken off at the Catskills or the Hamptons,
Yes.
and they haven't come back to the city since March. I know a few people like that. And then we have Cape Cod here, and the same thing has happened. People are staying, in their second homes, especially if they live in the city, because all the advantages of the city are to your disadvantage when you have a pandemic. And so, this flight to the suburbs has been a trend that I didn't really see. I have to be honest. And as a result, as I said, residential real estate fueled by 30-year mortgage rates of under 3% have really fueled that fire, and it seemingly will continue for a bit longer.
That's amazing. Absolutely mind-blowing. All these new things that you let our viewers be aware of. They're going to be knocking down your door.
Well, as I said, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of speculation. And since we've never been here before, we don't have a precedent, an historical precedent to be able to hang our hat on going forward. So a lot of it's judgmental. And as I just said, I was wrong about residential real estate. Okay,
Mhm.
I couldn't have been more wrong. I'm not the only one, but but many were. And we'll have more twists. I'll give you another example where I'm actually swimming against the tide. So we hear everybody's working remotely now. And so we hear, you look at the commuter lots around Greater Boston, they're 5 or 10% full. People aren't commuting into Boston. My next door neighbor, who's a bond trader, hasn't been to his office since March. And he can go back shortly.
On that, Camille has to wind up. We're ready to wind up.
All right. Well, maybe another time we'll talk about office space.
There's many things that we need to talk about, and I
Yeah,
think,
we're already going over almost.
all right, so we'll wrap up now. I think we're going to have a part 2.
All right, it'd be my
Yeah.
pleasure.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So thank you, viewers, for watching. There's much more to learn about the economy, especially now during the pandemic. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or any ideas for future topics, because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and you.
Thank you, Cliff
Thank
Caplan.
you, Cliff.
My pleasure, ladies.